2 months from now, the Jewish Historical Society of Metro West opens its second traveling exhibition entitled Born at the Beth. The exhibition will pay visual tribute to all the individuals who founded and funded and grew a Jewish hospital in the city of Newark more than 100 years ago, 1901 to be exact. This afternoon, in medical parlance, we're going to make the rounds. We're going to use the time to tell the story of Beth Israel just as if you lived it, because you did. It's a story of family, the Beth family. So what are the facts? In 1901, coincidentally, the same year that the first Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded, there were 5 major hospitals in the city of Newark: St. Barnabas, St. Michael's, St. James, the German Hospital, later Claramas, and City Hospital. Because of discriminatory practices, no Jewish doctors were on the staffs of these hospitals. The closest thing to a hospital setting was a clinic run by the doctors who staffed the Hebrew Hospital and Dispensary of Newark, located on the corner of Charlton and Kinney Streets. For the most part, Jewish patients, like Jewish doctors, were not welcome at the city's hospitals. First, there were the stories of terminally ill Jewish patients subjected to clergymen from other faiths trying to convert them. Then there were the stories of elderly Jews who chose to sacrifice their health rather than eat non-kosher hospital food. Such stories, real or imagined, did not sit well. The real catalyst for organizing Beth Israel was the death of a young Jewish woman, 18-year-old Esther Newman, who died from inaction of physicians at St. James Hospital who waited too long to operate on her appendicitis. The account of the tragedy circulated throughout the Jewish community. Enter the Daughters of Israel Hospital Association. What was the group's purpose? To raise funds to purchase a house to establish a small hospital. They made it no secret that they had their own ideas of how to get things done. They did not see eye to eye with the doctors at the Hebrew dispensary, and local newspapers reported accounts of the wrangling that went on between the two groups. When a meeting was held to raise $3,250, someone in the audience raised a hand to contribute $2, which was generous in those days, but a male heckler in the audience got up to say, "Go ahead, ladies, now you only need 3,248 more." But the women won the day. After months of friction, the two groups incorporated as the Beth Israel Hospital Association. A house was purchased for $4,000, and Beth Israel opened its doors to its first patients the year 1902. The very first medical staff consisted of 8 or 15 doctors, depending on what historical source you read, with a combined total of 20 years' experience. There was one dentist, Joseph Pusey, who was responsible for running and staffing a 1-chair dental clinic and a school of nursing staffed by a half-dozen new recruits. The School of Nursing. For close to 70 years, Beth Israel recruited and trained outstanding nurse graduates for what was referred to as the training school. Nurses were the backbone of patient care. Every effort was made to accommodate their needs. Room and board was provided. Generous scholarships were available. There never seemed to be enough nurses to staff the hospital's needs. The first generation of Beth nurses were required to be married to their jobs. Actually, early classes of graduate nurses were not permitted to be married, period. It wasn't until the 1940s that some provision was made so nurses could be married in the last semester of their senior year, but only with permission. Sometimes their careers took a different turn, and this is the penultimate Beth Israel nursing story. Student nurse Paula Muniz was caught up in a whirlwind romance with an ardent young Zionist whose name was David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion appeared in the ward of the hospital one afternoon and beseeched Paula to drop what she was doing, to make instant arrangements to get married, and to come with him to Israel, where he said he had a job in the offering. The couple's hurried conversation was overheard by Dr. Max Danzis and Dr. Victor Parsonet, who were in the ward at the time. Both men interrupted to remind Paula, "You only have 2 months to go to get your certificate. Wouldn't it be wiser to graduate and at least finish what you started?" Well, you know that reason is no competition for romance. So the couple married and went to Israel, the year 1915, a few days ago. The story doesn't end. 24 years later, Dr. Danzis traveled to Palestine, and during his visit, he was invited to speak to a group of nurses at Hadassah Hospital. You guessed it. Paula, this time the wife of Israel's Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, was there to greet him. In his remarks, Dr. Danzis referred to the opportunities open to nurses. Even someone in the audience could become the wife of a prime minister. Not one to be bested, Mrs. Ben-Gurion got up from her seat. She walked to the podium. She smiled at Dr. Danzis and added the following: "It was Mr. Ben-Gurion who made me his wife. It was I, who made him prime minister." And a good laugh was had by all. From the outset, Beth Israel was a family business. How so? Newark's 2 most prominent doctors, and you know who they are, most of you, Dr. Max Danzis and Dr. Victor Parsonet, made it their family's business to make this hospital a success. The earliest conversations regarding the founding of the Beth were hosted in their homes. Their wives, Augusta Parsonet and Jenny Danzis, were active volunteers. They are the 2 women who founded the Sewing Circle. By the title, you can guess what it did. 2 men, Danzis and Parsonet, saw each other as colleagues at the hospital during the day and spent leisure time together as friends and mishpacha. Parsonet's son, Eugene, married Danzis' daughter, Rose, and successive generations of doctors working at the Beth bore either the Parsonet or Danzis name. The current Dr. Victor Parsonet, who I wished was here today, world-renowned surgeon, recalled that from 1930 to 1950, there were many as 13 Parsonet and Danzis doctors or dentists working at the Beth at the same time, and they were all related, and if that's not a family business, what is? My opinion, I have a lot of them. Beth Israel is the greatest collective accomplishment ever launched by this Jewish community. Everybody had a vested interest in a hospital, and everyone participated in its success. The familiar charity box or pushka, all 4,450 of them, was placed on the store counter of local Jewish merchants, so everybody had a chance to drop in a few pennies. More successful merchants and manufacturers made larger donations, but early minutes ledgers refer to items that were classified as donations in kind. For whatever reason, especially in 2005, the entry of 1 jar of chicken fat from Mrs. Karlinsky for patient care captures my imagination. Hand-delivered sacks of potatoes, coffee, sugar, flour stocked the hospital larder, and all the hospital linens, every piece of them, for those of you who do or do not sew, were sewn individually by members of the Sewing Circle. This went on through the 1950s. It was an incredible outpouring of generosity. Now, Beth Israel has known 3 buildings in its 100-year history. The first building had 21 beds and was located on the corner of West Kinney and High Streets. From day one, the building was oversubscribed. 4 years later, in 1906, the building was raised, and in 1908, an 80-bed facility was erected on the same spot. Don't ask what goings-on surrounded the dedication of this new hospital building. 10,000 of Newark's Jews came by foot to join the parade of motor cars that literally wove through the adjacent neighborhood streets until they reached the hospital building. Every Jewish society, there were 75 of them, sent marchers. Bands played. Self-congratulatory speeches were the moment of the day, or the order of the day. And with a little imagination, you can almost hear President Henry Gross as he addressed the crowd. We have much to be grateful in this magnificent building, of which we all, as people, may be proud. Our new building now stands complete, ready for the good work which was erected, and this is the new Beth Israel Hospital. It was a brand new building, but nothing seemed to change. There never were enough beds to accommodate the constant influx of immigrants that continue to swell the Jewish community. They needed space. Once again, Newark's Jews mobilized the troops to raise money to build a new, larger hospital. It was the most comprehensive, well-publicized, successful fundraising campaign imaginable, the year 1924. Not enough can ever be said about the four men who spearheaded this effort. Felix Fuld, who donated 1/3 of the monies used to build this hospital. His business partner and brother-in-law, Louis Bamberger. Michael Hollander, heir to the Hollander fur-dyeing fortunes, and communal leader par excellence, Michael Stavitsky. All were in the forefront, and of course you'd realize there were others. As an aside, every name I mention, every activity I discuss, it's all in our archives, and you're always welcome to stop by. We'll give you the grand tour. Farmland was purchased on Lyons and Schuyler Avenues. A large sign was posted in the field that announced New Newark Beth Israel Hospital. Plans were drawn by Newark's only Jewish architect, Frank Rod, and in 1928, having raised $3.3 million in donations and pledges, Newark Beth Israel opened a state-of-the-art facility with 350 beds, a home for its School of Nursing, and a laboratory facility for sophisticated medical research. Then came the open house. Residents received a week-long invitation to come and tour the hospital building. 35,000 people showed up at the front door. It was such a crush that hours had to be limited and traffic flow monitored. It was a hospital. As a result of the commotion, a woman fell on the front steps, broke her collarbone, and the new Beth got its first admission. All life is in the timing. 1 year later, feeling flush with financial support from all its pledges, Beth Israel's board of directors could never have anticipated the crisis that ensued from the stock market crash of 1929. Suddenly, all bets were off and all pledges put on hold. It may be the title of a movie, but true grit describes what was required to navigate Beth Israel through the years of the Great Depression. The day-to-day business of admitting patients went on. From its inception, Beth Israel provided free medical care with the knowledge that the shortfalls would be made up by charitable contributions. But now there were no charitable contributions. Instead, banks called in their loans, and hospital board members were listening to talk of receivership. In common language, they were going to close the doors. It took a lot of jawboning and a few well-placed phone calls by Louis Bamberger to convince the banks and insurance companies that they would get their money. Then the finger-pointing started. Who's running this hospital? And what economies can we institute? And should we use legal means to collect unredeemed pledges? Thoughtful community leaders realized that any aggressive action to collect such monies would impact on future fundraising within the Jewish community, so they went slowly and deliberately. Fundraising, the perennial problem for all of us. Beth Israel was connected to an umbrella of Jewish agencies called the Jewish Community Council. It was the precursor of what we know today as United Jewish Communities of Metro West, or Federation. What was the relationship between the Beth and the Council? Well, both groups competed for the same dollars. There were Beth Israel campaigns and council campaigns. Now, if you read between the lines of the hospital's minutes, you can trace a very long-standing undercurrent of bad feelings between the two groups. Since Beth Israel received a portion of its budget from the Federation, it was subject to scrutiny by Federation leaders. There were ongoing struggles to establish a formula so Beth Israel received its share of campaign monies. Things you wouldn't think about affected Beth Israel's fortunes. What about monies that were diverted from the hospital to help found the State of Israel? Dollars had to come from somewhere. In all of this rancor, one star stayed in the firmament: the ladies who staffed and promoted the women's volunteer groups. You could always count on them to promote, support, and provide a constant stream of revenue, then and now. So what about the women who played such a pivotal role in the hospital's history? You'd want to be in a foxhole with any of them. There was no task too large or too small. They were the souls of hospitality, whether they were called the Sewing Guild, the Ladies Guild, the Sewing Circle, the Volunteer League, the Women's Auxiliary, just the plain auxiliary, you get the idea. They opened their homes and hearts to raise money for the hospital. As the hospital grew in size and demand, they never dropped the ball. So let's listen to what they did. Members sewed surgical pads, masks, and binders. They made weekly visits to ward patients. They hosted religious and secular parties. They provided a weekly movie to the children's ward. They established scholarships for nurses. They donated a Torah to the chapel. They opened and staffed a hospital gift shop and tea room. They ran a library service stocked with books, all in different European languages to reflect the hospital community. And they even established a motor service corps to transport disabled patients from their homes to the hospital clinic. That was just for 1 year. This phrase, born at the Beth, that you hear about, it's not new. As far back as 1931, and for 26 years, the members of Newark Maternity League came up with the idea for a baby's alumni. New mothers were visited by a volunteer, asked to donate $1 for pediatric research, to enroll their children in the baby's alumni, and to participate in an annual beautiful, healthy babies contest for which the winner might win a ton of coal. Not bad for a group of defenseless housewives. Now, there were no medical specialties or residency programs until the 1940s. So the Beth didn't have an affiliation with a New Jersey medical school because there wasn't any. And there was a reason for this, for those shaking your head. This is the short version of why New Jersey did not have a medical school at this time. Felix Fold died in 1929. He contracted pneumonia, and the doctors at Beth Israel couldn't save him. 5 months later, Louis Bamberger sold Bamberger's department store to R.H. Macy. Now, I didn't sit in on any Louis Bamberger or Sister Carrie Fold's conversations, but I can't imagine that their years of association and ardent support of Beth Israel didn't play into their decision to explore the idea of establishing a medical school in Newark or somewhere in New Jersey. Actually, they intended Princeton University. So they went to the expert, one Dr. Abraham Flexner. Flexner's advice was something like this: well, there's already a medical school in New York and one in Philadelphia, so that's enough for the area. This was not necessarily good advice, but what he proposed eventually led to the founding of the Institute for Advanced Study, where Albert Einstein got a job. The ramifications for Beth Israel were significant. Hospitals affiliated with medical schools are assured of a constant flow of interns and doctors. Nevertheless, even without and despite the absence of a medical school affiliation, Beth Israel attracted its fair share of doctors, always. Early on, when New Jersey had 26 board-certified surgeons on its medical lists, 23 of them practiced at Beth Israel. Today, North Beth Israel is a freestanding, fully accredited teaching hospital not affiliated with the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. However, some of the members on the staff have appointments teaching at UMDNJ. A word about the medical staff. There are a host of doctors, some of them here today who did time with the Beth, whose medical skills added luster to Beth Israel's reputation. Too many to mention. We take their skills for granted because that's what we expect. But what we often overlook has been their financial commitment. Example, in the 1950s, when it became clear that the Beth needed a new laboratory if it was going to ever be included in the stellar star of hospitals doing first-rate medical research, when it came time to put $900,000 together, 1/3 of that money came from Beth Israel's medical staff. Theirs is a pattern of generosity. So let's talk about medical research. Starting in 1953, Beth Israel published its own medical journal, aptly called the Journal of North Beth Israel Hospital. The purpose was to enable doctors to publish the results of their scientific research. As early as 1938, two doctors, Lester Goldman and Philip Levine, made medical history with the discovery of the Rh factor. Dr. Goldman's reputation as a world-class hematologist preceded him. Research on hemophilia inquiries came from all over the country, and he wasn't fazed by any of the notoriety. When asked by colleague Dr. Abraham Spicer what he felt his, meaning Goldman's, greatest accomplishment was, Goldman told Spicer the story of a significant increase of patients being referred to him because of elevated white blood cell counts. Goldman interviewed a series of the patients referred to him to determine some common thread in the upsurge of the condition. Goldman discovered that each of the individuals he interviewed had just bought a new pair of shoes. Ed Brody, you listening? New shoes, you say. Some of you remember for a period of time that shoe stores promoted a sales gimmick that buyers put their feet under a radiation-emitting fluoroscope to see how their feet fit inside the shoe. Well, the exposure to radiation caused the temporary problem. Goldman stuck through all the regulatory appeals to have the fluoroscopes removed from all the shoes all over the nation, and felt by doing so impacted the health of the United States. You gotta be a researcher to think that way, the common thread. So this is a perfect segue into talking about Beth Israel's list of medical firsts. To me, the list of accomplishments is exceptional, so hold on to your organs. What about New Jersey's first successful gallbladder removal, first pregnancy test, first kidney transplant, first heart transplant, first lung transplant, first simultaneous heart and kidney transplant? They happened at the Beth. World-renowned surgeon Dr. Victor Parsonet made headlines with the first successful implant of a nuclear battery-operated pacemaker. And New Jersey's first robotic surgery on a pediatric patient using the Da Vinci system was performed at the Beth. For 100 years, they haven't missed a pacemaker beat. The doctors established great relationships with their patients. How else could a doctor with a great sense of humor sit with a straight face as his patient informed him that she was suffering from hardening of her arteries? What about Mrs. Halberberg, are you here? Who asked if it was okay if she took a few buffalo for her headaches. Patient relations. Hospital administrators, Mr. Bornstein, know they can't please all of the patients all of the time, so I use one complaint to represent all. If any member of my family or anyone I know should require hospitalization, it will not be at Beth Israel. Unquote. The complaint, the hospital overcharged for anesthesia. President Abraham Lichtman took the charges seriously and checked the records. Lichtman's response, dear so-and-so, This hospital charges an all-inclusive rate. That you chose to use your own anesthesiologist was your choice. Further examination of your records reveal that when your daughter was admitted, she occupied one of our most desirable private rooms, and we gave you a significantly reduced rate. The second time your daughter was admitted, you persuaded the hospital to accept payment of the bill in an amount you dictated, which was much lower than the actual bill. And when your mother was admitted to this hospital, she was issued a private room and we charged you ward rates. We offer no apologies. In fact, we demand that you send us a public letter of apology since you have tarnished our reputation without cause. Amen. Beth Israel was known as the Jewish hospital, despite all the literature that declared its non-sectarian status. In 1940, 53% of the patients were Jewish. It went up or down a little bit in the 40s. But 1950, we read that there were 39% of Hebrew patients, as it was listed in the hospital minutes ledgers. But in all instances, clergymen from all denominations were welcome to conduct services for Gentile patients. Beth Israel may have been non-sectarian, but the flavor was Jewish. There was a chapel and a Torah ark. Newark's rabbis selected a chaplain who did double duty as the mishgiach, I hope this crowd knows what this is, who monitored the kosher kitchen, but this would change over years. The Ladies' Guild donated a Torah scroll. High holiday services were conducted. Passover seders were enjoyed. A rectangular room on the first floor was reserved for a brit milah or circumcision. Women came, had babies, stayed a week, so you were there already. So the ceremony, you have to visualize this, was conducted in a small room with a glass window. The father of the baby, the moel, and the godparents, each dressed in a white gown and mask, and they waited for the baby to come down from the nursery. Family members peered through the window, not all but some. When the ceremony was over, the baby was whisked back to the nursery and everybody stayed for a catered lunch. One-stop shopping. Now, let's not minimize the significance some individuals place on being born at the Beth. For years, Beth Israel issued a special birth certificate. I bet some of you would shake your head to tell me you got one in your drawer. Made out to baby boy or baby girl and the family's last name. The newborn's footprints were added to each certificate. And don't think that people don't hold on to these certificates. I've seen any number of them since we've started promoting this exhibition. One resident, Truth, actually told me that a member of her family used his Beth birth certificate to apply for a passport and was genuinely surprised when it was rejected. Likewise, many people remember the doctor that delivered them. More than one baby girl was named Rita for popular obstetrician Dr. Rita Finkler, who had the distinction of being the first woman on staff, maybe in all staff in all hospitals in New Jersey. What appeals to me is that Beth Israel continues to inspire loyalty from its employees. You came to work at the Beth and 40 years later you were retiring. Everybody was family. We're talking 2 and 3 generations in a family working or volunteering at the Beth. Husband and wife teams worked at the Beth. Sylvia and Marvin Becker, Mia and Victor Parsonet, Andrew and Berta Rados, Sam and Gertrude Ash, Harry and Eva Brodkin, Zelda Marks and Sidney Rosenthal, and I'm sure there are many more. And sometimes for me, getting this information was like pulling teeth, which leads me to the dental clinic. Beth Israel is home to the oldest and largest dental clinic in New Jersey. In 2001, when Beth Israel celebrated its 100th anniversary, Dr. Edward Gressman's dental colleagues honored him for 60 years of consecutive volunteer service. Likewise, but I don't think here today, Dr. Alan Brooklyn volunteered 53 years at the clinic. Thousands of patients have been seen at the Beth Clinic. And there are 2, 3, and 4 generation family doctors like the Kasweiners, like the Shivians and the Rothenbergs, who still volunteer time. For 10 years, the dental clinic hosted an annual Dr. Charles Johnson lecture. The funds for the lecture came from a request given to the clinic by Dr. Johnson. Why mention it? Dr. Johnson made dental history. He was appointed Chief of Dental Services, making him the first African American to hold such a post in the nation, and it happened at the Beth. But Beth Israel wasn't born in a vacuum. Along with larger city hospitals, there were smaller private hospitals serving specific ethnic groups. One needs mentioning. Founded because black doctors could not get staff positions in Newark hospitals, founded because black residents weren't welcome at the city's hospitals, which sounds a little familiar, Dr. John A. Kenny spent his savings and opened Kenny Hospital. Some remember it as Community Hospital. And guess where it was located? On West Kinney Street, near the corner of High. And guess what was across the street from it? Beth Israel Hospital. Kenny was a man with vision and determination. He received courtesy privileges at the Beth when something like that did not necessarily happen. He even referred patients after the Beth moved to Lyons Avenue. It's now a Baptist church, and our new trustee, Mark Gordon, was part of the crew that shepherded through the building, meaning the one-time hospital building, now a current historic site on the national and state registers. So what about life at the Beth during World War II? Just what you'd expect it to be. There were shortages of nurses, shortages of doctors, shortages of interns, shortages of labor, and shortages of patients. One additional shortage that you wouldn't think about, that was for the first time in the hospital's history, there was a shortage of patients at the clinics. Why? Everybody had a job, so everybody could pay the bill. And for one brief moment in its history, Beth Israel ran in the black. Graduate nurses joined the armed services. Beth's nursing program was approved by the United States government for training of nurses for the United States Cadet Corps. 60,000 volunteer hours filled the void. And that was for 1 year. And many more volunteer hours went into washing the dishes in the kitchen. Interns went from 12 months of training to 9. Doctors joined the armed forces, others were drafted, and others couldn't convince any branch of the armed forces to take them because of various physical or age restrictions. Dr. Arthur Bernstein recalled his struggle to join the Army. Bernstein went to his local draft office and stood in line to enlist. The recruiting agent studied him up and down, looked at the results of his physical, announced there was no way Bernstein, who had a bad back, was getting into this man's army. He, the recruiting agent, knew all about guys like Bernstein who enlisted so they could collect a lifetime pension if they could get injured. Instead, Bernstein, like other older Beth Israel doctors, volunteered for a medical unit called the Public Health Service, bought his own uniform, and went for a week's training to a base on Staten Island, where he and a group of fellow doctors listened intently to the drill instructor who alerted them to the importance of recognizing the symptoms of venereal disease. On the more serious side, Beth Israel was put on alert for possible enemy attack as it was close to Newark Airport and the Atlantic coastline. Beth Israel was cited, or was decided, to be one of New Jersey hospitals, 2 New Jersey hospitals, to be the repository for blood plasma in case of emergency. Everything got put on hold until the doctors and nurses returned from the war, and then everything changed everywhere. The end of World War II signaled the beginning of residencies in surgery, medicine, and orthopedics. It also signaled a shift of Jews moving out of the fabled Weequahic section of Newark to the suburbs. 19 years after World War II ended, someone in the hospital community got up the nerve to publicly acknowledge that Beth Israel was no longer the hospital of their mothers and fathers, and these were the facts. Beth Israel was being staffed by many who were not Jewish, was being served by many who were not Jewish, was located in an area that was no longer predominantly Jewish, and was being supported mostly by non-Jewish funds, the year 1965. So Beth Israel was at a crossroads, and Alan Sagner didn't mince words. There was a decision to be made. Do we stay? Do we go? Does Beth Israel stay true to its creed to provide medical services as it had done for 6 decades up to that point? Or should the board members explore the option of building a satellite hospital in the suburbs to reflect the shift in Jewish demographics? If they weren't moving rather, it was time to build and expand. Sagner said, we stay and we build. 2 years later, some of you may remember it distinctly, 1967, a year we can't ignore. Newark was rocked by riots. Local businesses were looted and burned, and area residents surrounding the hospital watched as several hundred rioters and innocent bystanders were taken to Beth Israel's emergency room for treatment. With their stores gone, their safety in question, the last remaining residents in Weequahic Jewish community moved. 1968. In the process of taking stock of who they were and what they wanted the Beth to become, members of the board decided it was time for Beth Israel to become a medical center in order to reflect its various expanding medical specialties. How do you become a medical center? Conventional wisdom suggests you ask the experts, surely a time-consuming activity. Looking to streamline the process, Dr. Marvin Becker raised his hand at a board meeting and made the following suggestion. Tomorrow morning, when the telephone operator answers the phone, just have her say, "Good morning, Beth Israel Medical Center," and that is how the Beth became a medical center. The story was told to me by the gentleman seated to my left, Lester Bornstein. Lester M. Bornstein. Lester is a member of the Jewish Historical Society's Board of Trustees. He has gifted, if he doesn't know it, his papers, photographs, and memorabilia to our archives. Lester was hired to be the assistant director at Beth Israel in 1957. From his post as executive director, Lester oversaw the 9 construction phases that grew a world-class medical center. Affectionately referred to, if you didn't know it, as Mr. Beth Israel, or father of the Beth family, Lester's 39-year career was capped when his name went up in lights with the naming of the Lester M. Bornstein Center for Emergency Services. A well-deserved honor. He's in the process of writing his memoirs. I think the first copy goes to his wife Marilyn, seated next to him, and the second copy has to go to Lester Z. Lieberman. Lester Lieberman, also a member of our society, established his role as the perennial building chairman, the long-tenured chairman of the board, and the moving force behind the last construction phase that grew Beth Israel to its current 1.2 million square feet. From 1964 or thereabouts to 1994 and thereabouts, wherever you look, there was some hole being dug, some building being raised, some parking lot being built, and just a lot of change. Change. Looking change, square in the eye, is a tough thing to do. Just when the Beth's decision makers thought they had gotten all their ducks in a row, i.e. the last construction phase was completed, some unrelenting force with the initials M&A, or merger and acquisition, came calling. 30 years after the decision was made to stay in Newark, the question now being posed was, do we stay or do we sell? The era and the reasons for maintaining a non-profit voluntary Jewish hospital had long since passed. One by one, other Jewish hospitals around the nation were merging and closing. They couldn't go alone, and neither could the Beth. So in 1996, Newark Beth Israel Medical Center was sold to St. Barnabas Healthcare System. The sale was contingent upon the condition that the hospital remain in Newark and that the name Beth Israel and the Jewish star that identified the building never be changed. The proceeds of the sale, all $125 million, established the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, which is thriving and growing today, for the purpose of giving grants to support the healthcare needs of the residents of Newark South Ward, Metro West community, medical education, and medical research at Beth Israel. So, let's hear it for history. The facts are there. We founded it, we funded it, we supported it, and for future generations, it's nice to know that because of all of us, it happened at the Beth. Yeah. So there are some of you in the audience, I believe, have a little Beth history to share. I cannot ignore the fact that the long-term 40-year director, executive director, and father of the Beth is in our audience. Lester, would you like to say a few words? Few. No.
I have to say one little tidbit. You took that thing away about Marvin Becker. It was large in my memory. There's one other memory I never told you about, and that is because we had shortages of nurses, we had to recruit them all over. And many nurses came from Ireland, and we would say to them jokingly, not Beth Israel, it's no MBIH, no better Irish hospital.
That's good. Is there anybody else who'd like to add to the Beth history? Now, you know we're going to make one last plug. I know some of you have submitted photographs to our promotion. If you, a relative, or a friend were born at the Beth, we want your photo, any age, any stage. We'll put your face in our exhibition. The exhibition opens September 15th here. If you gave me a photo, you will get an invitation. And of course, if you are a member of our society, I'm assuming everybody here is a member of the Jewish Historical Society, you will get an invitation to the opening reception. I hope you've got a sense that it has been an amazing run. Beth Israel is a credit to the community. Elliot, something to say? You're okay? Yes.
I just wanted to say that my father worked in a hospital in 1925. He came in every day from Brooklyn at that time, and he was just an ordinary electrician. Of course, after a certain number of years, he became a engineer, electrical engineer. My son worked in the hospital when they put an addition on it, and he was an ordinary electrician at that time. His dad was an electrical contract.
That's good. Yes. Dr. Orleans, you have anything to offer here? You thought I'd never ask.
My grandmother and grandfather were Julius and Nettie Patchen, and Nettie was born in 1876, so she was around 20 years old when they started the fundraising, and she was one of the many who went around door to door with the pushka, collecting the early monies. She ultimately wrote an article which was published in the Jewish News of the first 50 years, which was 50-odd years ago. And lots of memories. I was born there. I was born on High Street. I was on staff of the hospital for a few years, but since my office was in Livingston, I unfortunately deserted the Beth and joined Barnabas up in the suburbs. Thank you for calling.
Holly, I know you're here. I saw you over here. Holly is the development director for today's Beth Israel Medical Center. Would you like to say a few words?
I would just like to say that Lindy did a fantastic job. I know you didn't do this. It was really wonderful. You told very energetically, and I think captured the spirit of the Beth in the past and the present. And if you haven't been to the Beth recently, please come and visit. We'd love to show you around. We don't want you to have to come as a patient, although we know you get fantastic care, but we would love to have you take a tour. It's a great place still. You started a wonderful place that continues. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot.
My name is Myron Cash. Back in the 60s and 70s, I was the first one to learn everything that was going on in the hospital. My mother was the receptionist. Myron, Lenny's mother, was sick. Sammy's wife had a baby. I got all the news before anybody knew.
That's great. Well, the Beth was a family, still is a family, and we're all part of it.